Life Unrehearsed, brought to you by Lianas Senior Transition Support, specialists in downsizing and seniors residences.
And welcome back to Life Unrehearsed. Matt Delvecchio here, specializing in life transitions, downsizing in the senior living industry.
And I'm Corey Sirota, clinical social worker and author of Someone Died, Now What? Well, you hear it. We're Life Unrehearsed. We're living it. We're doing it, and we're making sure that you get all the support that you need. So we've revised a little bit of our process
segments.
Our segments. Yeah, I can't think of the word, but I was thinking the second half. No, our segments, and we're going to be having to specifically gear our information and support to helping moms and dads, and that could be, in this case, primarily your sandwich generation. So you're living your life, you've got your family, you may have younger kids, you may have young adults, but you also have parents that are living and perhaps in need of support as well. So there's a whole host of issues that you're going to encounter, and that's where we thought we would direct and focus our energy on the second half of our show.
Yeah, and feedback from our first time we did this last week was just fantastic. We even had, although this is directed to the sandwich generation, worried about moms and dads, we had a couple of moms and dads and even grandmas and grandpas that came back to us, hey, by the way, that was helpful for me too, So no matter who it is, this is the goal of what we're trying to do with our Helping Moms and Dads segment here on Life Unrehearsed. And we thought something, Corey, you and I hear about a lot is caregivers. Everyone, believe it or not, we've had caregivers and stats and so on. Around 1 out of every 4 and 1 out of every 5 Canadians, we're talking over 8 million people in Canada, are doing some form of caregiving for a loved one, a friend, a neighbor. And we constantly hear it's just difficult to get the proper resources. I wish I knew then what I know now. We hear that all the time. So we figured, what better person than Holly Stroll to kick this off? And Holly is a caregiver and the founder of a very helpful and informative Facebook group called West Island Support and Resources for Caregivers of the Elderly. I've known Holly now for a couple of years, and she really is incredible. She's so passionate about providing support and advice to caregivers, and they're usually stressed and worried about their loved ones. And Holly just has a way of bringing those stress levels down with all the wonderful advice she has on her Facebook caregiver page. And so, Holly, we want to welcome you to Life Unrehearsed.
Hi. Oh, my goodness, what an intro.
Well, Holly, it's deserved. Like I mentioned, we've known each other for a while, and it's just amazing. All of a sudden, after going to your page or getting your input, it's like I don't feel like on an island anymore, and you've just done some wonderful things. But first, we should probably get some perspective here. So can you provide us with a brief background about your own caregiving journey and the challenges you faced?
Sure. So my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's a little over 10 years ago, and at that time, my sister was a social worker for the Cumming Center, and she was well connected with the services and resources that were available for my mom, and she had all of that well taken care of. She also lived in the upper duplex of my parents' home, so her and my dad were the main caregivers with the help as well of the CLSC. Then about 3 years ago, my dad began to have issues with his prostate and needed to be hospitalized. So my sister and I, as well as a private caregiver, began looking after my mom. But then unfortunately, 2 months later, my sister was diagnosed with uterine cancer. And that's when my journey really began. I had become everyone's caregiver. There's a lot of truth in that saying that you don't realize how strong you are until you have no choice. You're on autopilot. Your life is completely changed, put on hold, and you have a new normal until you learn how to integrate and manage your responsibilities the best you can with your old normal, which doesn't always happen so quickly or easily. And this is usually when the decision to become a caregiver is made in a crisis situation. I found the challenges were like so many others find themselves dealing with, mostly about balancing being there for everyone, wanting to do my best, but also knowing that I had my limitations. I was running a business, taking care of my family, Then you find yourself going to doctor's appointments, having caregivers counseling. It goes on and on.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I hear you, Holly.
Yeah, I had the full support of my husband. He picked up where I had to leave off with my home and family responsibilities, so that alleviated a portion of the stress. And there are the medical challenges, keeping them as healthy and safe as possible, making sure the medications are working and not causing more issues, finding the right caregivers. And, there's days you just want to hide in a closet and hope no one finds you. And then there are days when my 92-year-old mother with dementia, unable to coherently speak, tells me that she loves me, and it just re-energizes you emotionally and physically.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Holly, with all of that, and that is quite an overwhelming experience to have to and responsibility to undertake, you ended up creating this Facebook page, West Island Support and Resources for Caregivers of the Elderly.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
So the group was created before all of this had happened with my family. My sister, like I had mentioned, had my parents covered with the services they needed, but my mother-in-law, who was living in the West Island, was initially diagnosed with breast cancer about 8 years before and needed some assistance after a relapse. And fortunately, she was able to stay in her home with the proper research and home care. So once I began to search for all of this information for her, I fell upon all of these government subsidies and services and tax credits. And I realized that I cannot be the only one in this position who started from zero, feeling lost and frustrated. So I began the group. It's not limited to the West Island, but many of the resources were found there, and there really wasn't a group for the area. And sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned that because although in the title of the page it is West Island, I'm seeing more and more that it's expanding throughout, and a lot of the information you're giving, Holly, is generalized. It could be applicable to anyone. So we're talking to Holly Stroll. She's the founder of the Facebook group called West Island Support and Resources for Caregivers of the Elderly. One of the challenges caregivers face is just finding those right resources. And there are a ton of questions asked on this Facebook page. And Holly, I'm always amazed at the number of responses from people and caregivers, just like you, that have already experienced similar issues. And, I think it'd be beneficial to families and listeners right here to hear some of those most requested questions and to get your feedback. So we're going to kind of do this in a rapid fire question and answer period.
No.
Okay, Holly, you ready to roll? We see often the challenges of accessing services from the CLSC. So what is the process to get some help from the CLSC?
So to begin the process, you'd first need to find the center for the person you are calling for, which you would do by searching with their postal code. You then call and ask to speak with the intake department and describe the senior situation. Be very specific of your fears for their safety, their health, and why they need the assistance. There are so many services available from the CLSC, but unfortunately, even prior to COVID, many centers have not been as well budgeted as others or staffed, and that leaves a big gap in time from when you made the first call to when you received the first response. So when you are told someone will get back to you, don't check that off your to-do list so fast. You will most likely need to be a little proactive. Write the date of your first call, ask for the name of the person you spoke with, and follow it up with a second call maybe a week later. They might not have any news for you, but you're not just another name on a very long list. And if you find you're waiting too long and feel like you're not being heard, you could always call 811 Info Santé. They may not get you a social worker right away, but they have been known to help things sometimes move a little faster depending on the situation. It can't hurt to try.
Oh, yeah, that's great advice. What about hiring a caregiver?
So there's many routes you can take when needing to hire a caregiver. You could turn to an agency, which is great because they will usually find a good match for what you are looking for, as well as a replacement if there's ever a scheduling issue or a caregiver is unable to make their shift. But of course, it can be a bit more costly for to hire from an agency. For anyone who wants to join the group, you'll find many members that are caregivers looking for the employment. However, no matter where you find your caregiver, do your due diligence and ask for references. Do a police check if you feel it offers more comfort. Have the potential caregiver visit with your loved one and yourself. But I suggest to speak about the responsibilities prior so you're not doing so in front of the person the services are for, as it can make them feel a little embarrassed or uncomfortable, maybe even a little humiliated. Give the potential caregiver different scenarios that might occur and see how they would respond to get an idea of their experience and knowledge. Example, my mother can be difficult when it's time for her medication. How would you convince her? Think of your daily challenges and routines with them, and the questions will be easy.
Now, Holly, that is absolutely one of the biggest topics you're getting on your Facebook page is getting caregivers. We're going to continue with some of this rapid-fire Q&A, including one of the most requested questions concerning what subsidies are out there.
Welcome back. You're listening to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Corey Sirota with Matt Del Vecchio, and we are talking to Holly Stroll. She's the founder of the Facebook group West Island Support and Resources for Caregivers of the Elderly. She is sharing some very helpful tips related to caregiving. I understand there's subsidies out there for families. Can you talk about some of them?
Yeah, there's many, but because of this rapid fire, I'm going to have to cut it short.
Yeah, the most popular would be great.
Okay, so there's many tax credits, and whatever I mentioned now is available on the CRA website. There's the Canada Caregiver Tax Credit, the Disability Tax Credit, the Home Accessibility Tax Credit, and the Medical Expense Tax Credit. And all of this can be found, like I said, on the website, or your accountant is more than well-versed on all of this and can help with that as well and let you know if you're eligible or not. One good one is the home credit for support services for seniors. Mm-hmm. For seniors over 70 who are receiving services such as snow removal, gardening, house cleaning, nursing, the percentage reimburses up to 35%, and the maximum paid is $8,925 per person. So, I mean, it is a good, keep the receipts, and it's a really good tax break to have. The residential adoption assistance program, where you would need a letter from an OT, which would state that you're in need of adoption to your home. So if you own the home, it can go as high as $16,000 to make any adoptions, and if you don't, it'll be less if you rent, but it's still there. What many caregivers don't realize is that they're also entitled to unemployment insurance if they're working. It could be used towards caregiving. If you need to take a leave of absence from your job, it provides 55% of your earnings up to about $595 a week. And it can be shared with another family member at the same time or after each other. And you don't have to be a family member. You could be considered a close person to the family. And it's not a long-term fix, but it definitely can help. So the tax credits can be found, like I said, on the CRA website. And the programs and services that I also mentioned can be found on the Quebec.ca website under programs and services for seniors.
That's amazing. Corey, that's why we have Holly, because she really does have these resources. Talking to Holly Stroll, founder of the Facebook page West Island Support and Resources for Caregivers of the Elderly. We're going to continue real quick, Holly. I know, we've talked about finding caregivers. We've talked about these tax subsidies and accessing services from the CLSC. Very quickly, you get a lot of requests about finding a residence, don't you?
I do, yes. The residents will always come up as well. You can go either route. So this can be either a smooth and easy choice families have to make, or a really difficult and more often than not a guilt-ridden one as well. So the either route is public or private. So when home care is not a viable option, the only alternative is placement. And you can go, if you go public, you would need to have a CLSC social worker involved. And they would go over the needs of your loved one and advise you to pick 3 centers in order of preference. Depending on the center you choose, the wait time can be very long. So what usually happens is if placement is needed sooner than the availability of a permanent residence, they will assign an intermediary bed in a center. And so that would be a temporary placement. The unfortunate thing about that is that it can be anywhere in the city. You don't have a choice where it will be. For private, the process is a bit different because you do not need government intervention. It is all done either on your own or through a service that will work with you free of charge. No idea where to find one of those.
Dear to my heart, Holly.
It's such a great service because knowing their needs and their preferences, you help find the best suitable residence for them, and you take all the guesswork and the legwork out of it for the families. Mm-hmm. So, so going private with an agency is also, it makes a good and well-matched choice. Mm-hmm. There's also senior low-cost independent living apartments that are not for profit or run by the city for those that qualify financially and physically. Again, they are for autonomous living, so there's no nursing care or caregivers provided, but you are still able to have the CLSC visits if needed. And they usually will include 1 meal per day and utilities.
Holly, what are some of the other popular services that are asked for on the Facebook page?
Oh, my goodness. There'll be, someone's looking for a podiatrist, physiotherapy, mobile blood tests. There's so many. And we have actually many of these services provided by a selection of our members. There's a directory by profession, and the members' contact information on the page. So you can actually go to a member of the group, and they can provide what you're looking for.
That's what I love so much about the page. And you can go on, access, you go search whatever is required. And the odds are, Holly, the question has been asked, and you just need to search it. And every possible service for caregivers is there. And I might add, Holly, and I don't know how you do it because you live a full life. You respond personally to a lot of these questions, and very, very excellent answers. I got to take my hat off to you, Holly, because you have helped so many caregivers, and in turn, they are telling their friends and neighbors and loved ones. So you have this multiple effect there. So we want to thank you so much for coming on the show. We know it was a challenge to get you on the show, Holly, and you are so wonderful to so many people. Can you just repeat, how can people find this Facebook page?
Of course. So you need to have a profile on Facebook, and then in the search, type in West Island Support and Resources for Caregivers of the Elderly. I just want to mention very quickly, there's questions to answer. You don't really have to answer those questions. It just helps me to better inform myself of what the needs are of the members. But what I do ask is that the questions, not the questions, but the rules are agreed to. We run a tight ship. We just want to make sure that there's the nature of the group is for kindness and non-judgmental, towards others, very supportive. So we like to maintain that level of respect.
Absolutely, so true. And you don't have that typical social media, arguments. It's such a wonderful page. Holly, we have to wrap up. I have to get a little shout out for your day-to-day life. You are a wonderful dog sitting company called the Crate Escape, and the feedback from all you do for these wonderful dogs and dog parents are so wonderful. A little shout out for Crate Escape. Holly, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you both.
All right, that's Holly Stroll, caregiver and founder of the Facebook group called West Island Support and Resources for Caregivers of the Elderly. Corey, what do we have coming up on the second half?
On the second half? You mean next week? Next week, is there such thing as a good divorce? Join us next week, and we'll talk to psychologist Jody Zentner about how couples make that happen. And notary Nadia Derigi, I can't speak today, is going to help us get our legal documents in order.
An excellent notary coming up next week. All right, thanks for tuning in to Life Unrehearsed. And we also want to give a shout out to the man working the board, Brian Calasar. Great job. Thanks so much, Brian. You can join us every Saturday on Life Unrehearsed at 3 p.m. Please join us.
Life Unrehearsed, brought to you by Lianas Senior Transition Support, specialists in downsizing and seniors residences.